Welcome to the Chain Effect Podcast, where a physical therapist and a dietitian married with 2 kids juggle the struggle of running a business, raising a family, and prioritizing our own health, all while trying to have as much fun as possible.
We are your hosts, Taylor Pope, Doctor of Physical Therapy, and
Caroline Pope, registered dietitian.
Together we own and operate a health facility, bringing together physical therapists, dietitians, personal trainers, and active recovery services to create what we call the Chain Effect. Today we're going to talk about the YIPs. And what are the YIPs? Where do they come from? And this is something that when I brought it up, I think you just looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language.
Yeah, I have no idea what the YIPs are, but I just looked it up. And one of the definitions is a state of extreme nervousness that causes a golfer to miss an easy putt.
Yeah. So a golfer, if you've ever golfed, then you probably have experienced this at one point or another, or at least some people have. But essentially, it's the idea that you have a relatively easy thing to do. Maybe it's a 4-foot putt, like just a little tap in, and you're stressing over it, and your body does not do what you asked it to. And so, when you look it up online, they talk about performance anxiety. And for me, I remember when this really sort of reared its ugly head for me, and it was at a disc golf tournament. And I had been playing disc golf for probably 15 years, and I'd been playing ultimate continuous alongside of that. So in my mind...
Big Frisbee guy.
Yeah, big Frisbee guy, throwing lots of Frisbees. So in my mind, how could I not be successful at this disc golf tournament? In my mind, I was going to go in having never really played a disc golf tournament, and not only was I going to do well, but I was planning to win it. And so I had that expectation. I've thrown, way more discs than anybody else at this tournament. Like, of course, I'm going to go in and be great. And what happens is...
I remember this.
So... I go out there, I'm playing a little bit decent, but I have like a 10-foot putt, which in disc golf is nothing. It's just, the basket's huge. So you're basically throwing it, across a table into the chains. And I miss it. And I miss it badly. And then I finally get it in the basket. And then on the next tee, I'm standing up there and I have to throw it sort of straight down this alleyway and this is a course I play all the time. And I've shot pretty low rounds here, but I'm throwing it through this basically a tunnel, and the disc stays in my hand so long that I release it Sideways. Yeah. I basically throw it directly sideways, like back towards the previous hole where other people are walking.
That's like when I throw a Frisbee and I don't fully go through and I'm like, why did it go sideways?
And that's kind of what it is.
Just didn't fully release. Like it was kind of locked.
So it stays in your hand, and, we call that grip lock. And there's nothing these are strangers that I'm playing with. But when this started happening, it didn't just stop with this round. Like, it started happening in all my disc golf rounds. And there's nothing like your friends, you basically throw it sideways and they're like, holy crap, what was that? What in the world? And then you're having
so that happened, that continued?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It continued for months.
Just casual, when you were playing casually.
And then, I was playing casually. I mean, we were betting, but I was playing casually. Mm-hmm. And, I'm so once you grip lock it and you throw it sideways, then what do you do next? You're worried that you're going to let go of it.
Nonstop.
And so I'm grip locking it, I'm releasing it early, and just, not on my game at all. And it's all I'm thinking about. And so this went on for at least a few weeks, I think a couple months. And luckily it had never really bled into ultimate. And then wham, it started happening a little bit in ultimate. And I was like, oh gosh, I got to figure this out. And so this really sent me on a journey of trying to figure out and solve this problem for myself. And I really think that it uncovered a lot of things that had been going on with me in general for a long time, but it also helped me develop a bunch of strategies to deal with it. And I read a lot of books and did a lot of research on the YIPs and
Because it can affect people with other sports.
Sure.
Typically.
Yeah. I mean, it can affect, the yips sort of classically is like a golfing thing, but it's also, it's happened to a lot of, baseball players.
It says another definition says involuntary wrist spasms that occur most commonly with golfers, but
Right.
like darts, baseball.
Yeah. Basketball. So free throw shots, like all of a sudden you start airballing free throws. And, what's happening there is, when you're a novice, when you haven't played a sport for a long time, it's really easy to approach it with a growth mindset. So you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to practice, I'm going to get better. I'm not too worried about whether or not I miss this shot. I'm just a beginner. And so you identify yourself as a beginner. But when you've been playing something for a long time, it's really easy to get in the mindset where you're identifying yourself as an expert, or at least a very advanced player.
So expectations are way higher.
Exactly. So your expectations are higher, and all of a sudden you start to think about the results. You start to think about your identity as someone who is good at this sport. And then that sort of results mindset starts to get in the way of trusting your body, and you start overthinking it. And so once I started, going down this journey of trying to figure out, I could really trace some of this back to like very early days in sports for myself. I grew up playing soccer, and early on, I latched on to soccer. I grew up not having a father figure in my life. And when I started playing soccer and started having a team, I got all this really positive connection with having a coach and being on a team. And frankly, like in the beginning, I got in trouble a lot and I would get in fights. And I remember my coach, Rocky McCullum, would always say that like I was just an angry kid. But every time I would get in a fight, he would make me run laps. And so every day spending, part of the practice running laps, I got pretty decent at running. And then I started to have a little bit of success with soccer. And then from there, I realized that practice and effort would lead to improvement. And so I started to have this correlation with caring and effort leading to more time with practice, leading to better results. And it just became this sort of feed forward loop that I think a lot of athletes will experience, especially early on when they're first, picking up a sport. And so carrying this forward, I ended up playing soccer at a pretty high level. And then I started playing, some things happened. I started playing lacrosse, same thing. I played lacrosse in high school, started as a junior, and I just fell in love with it, practiced every day, was doing that, after school,
by
in the
yourself,
off season, by myself,
in your yard,
by myself. I had some
Only
friends who would play with me, but like, yeah, I would take a bucket of balls and just like rip it at the net over and over again. And I got really good, really fast, got recruited to play in college, and then went to college. And all of a sudden I was one of like 90 freshman recruits. And this is a small school. This is like 2,000 kids. This is a D3 school. And there were 90 freshman recruits. And
wow. Small fish in a big pond all of a sudden.
Yeah. And I'm the Florida kid who's been playing lacrosse for 2 years. And, Florida lacrosse compared to everywhere else in the Northeast, it didn't even compare. And so all of a sudden, everyone's way better than me. And I have this meeting with my coach, and he says, hey, just want to let you know, like you're 12 of 12 on the depth chart. And, unless something dramatic happens, like you're never going to see the field. So I would either like hit the weight room and, come back a lot stronger, or maybe just, spend your time doing something else.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. And, I look back at that moment, and a lot of times I wonder like how I would handle that now, because I think I've, increased my mental toughness a lot. And I may have, now like taken that as more of like a challenge. But back then I was like, okay, so I guess I'm not cut out for lacrosse. Go find something else to do. And it just so happened that day, my RA, David May at the time, was like, hey, we're going to go and play Ultimate. Have you ever played? And I said, no, but I'll come out and play. And so we're playing against some fraternity and we're having a good time. And I, jump up and catch the disc. I still don't know how to throw it at all. And then at the end, we're in a huddle and they're like, okay, we're going to turn this into the school team. And they just basically like point at me and they say, do you want to be on the team? And I was like, yeah, put me on.
Sure.
Like, I'm on the team. And so the next day they had given me a Frisbee and I was like, before practice, I got there an hour and a half beforehand and I'm literally just throwing the Frisbee to nobody. I'm just throwing it in the field, running, getting it, throwing it again, working on the different throws. And so
we knew how to practice at that point.
Exactly. So same thing, get the practice, start practicing, play it every day. And then that led to being pretty good at it and developing those necessary skill sets to go from beginner to advanced. And then I kept going with it. And, at some point I crossed over to playing on better and better teams but still like in that like growth mindset. And then finally I, was fortunate enough to be selected to an elite men's team in North Carolina. And that's Ring of Fire. I played with them for 13 years. But as a team, our identity was always, we cared more than you. We were going to out effort you all the time. And we were grinders and we were just going to like blue collar, wear you out and beat you with our effort and our desire to win. Mm-hmm. And so I think I adopted that mindset too, of just the more I care, the better I'm going to be. And that got me a long way. But our team as a whole would always fall short at nationals. We would always, and it wouldn't be like, we would have great talent. Our talent was...
Well, you'd make it close.
Yeah.
You'd always make it close, right?
We'd make it close.
To winning the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And we'd have great talent. So we would win tournaments in the early season. We would win games at nationals. We would beat higher seeded teams than us. But then as the tournament would progress and we would get to the semis or we get to the quarters, we just would not have our best game. Mm-hmm. And we would, for like 8 years in a row, I remember we would just not have our best game. And looking back, I really think it was because we would care so much. Mm-hmm. And we also had this little bit of added extra pressure that the team had this incredibly long history and had never won nationals. And so we had this little bit of extra pressure that we would be the team to finally break through and win nationals. And I think just having that little bit of extra expectation, that little bit of, we're going to be the team, like we are the best.
Put a lot of pressure on all of you.
Yeah, we put this
now,
extra
didn't
pressure
y'all have
on
a sports psychologist come a couple times years ago?
Yeah, he was awesome. Sports psychologist for UNC. What's his name? Hack, Dr. Hack.
And what did he talk about mostly?
So he talked a lot about, putting it on the externals. So when you're in that moment, and this, I thought this clicked with me at the time, but I really don't think it did. But he would say, try to focus on the grass. Try to focus on something that was outside of your own head in those moments. Try to focus on how your body was feeling while it was running. And so kind of trying to get yourself out of your own head and more into just letting the body do. Mm-hmm. But I think at the time I maybe used some of that and we did have some success, but I think that there was one piece that I was just always missing in that. And it wasn't until I read, so I had this event with the disc golf where, and in one of those holes, this is how bad it was. So I had to throw it over this pond, right? And so I'm standing on the tee and there's like,
which you always excel at, like any other time.
Yeah. And then there's like 30 people around because it's backed up and I'm standing on the tee pad and I go to throw and the disc stays in my hand so long, I drop it. It like falls out of my hand behind the tee pad.
Oh no.
So everyone else has to throw, they throw. And then normally everyone just starts walking up. No, in this case, everyone else throws
Had to stay.
and then they back up a little bit because now I have to throw from behind the tee pad.
Oh, man.
And of course, like now I'm laying up and now I'm, and it's just like, I'm throwing a throw that's completely different from this backhand that normally is my best throw because I'm just afraid I'm going to do it again.
So what books did you read and what changed that?
So I started out reading Top Dog, which was a book on competitiveness and the sort of science of competition. That I think is by Poe Bronson. And then I read The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, basically.
Star, asterisk.
We'll just leave it at that. And in that book, from the very beginning, he talks about a poet who was working to try to get his name out there. He was, trying so hard. And then he fell into like alcoholism, and I think he ended up dying. And then later his work was, thought of as being great. And he starts off talking about that, but then he talks about the fact that, basically the more you care, the more you're going to get in your own way. Mm-hmm. And so the subtle art of not giving an F is not that you just don't care, but you have to realize what your caring is. Mm-hmm. And essentially...
Or worrying.
Yeah, or what your worrying is.
Caring is one thing and then worrying too much.
Exactly. But basically, what it is it's fear. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening on the disc golf tee. It's fear. Mm-hmm. I have this expectation of myself as someone who is able to throw Frisbees. And like I said before that tournament, like I'm able to throw Frisbees better than anyone else here. Like I've thrown more Frisbees than anyone else here. And then you take that and then you're standing on the tee and now you have to do it. And what would people think if all of a sudden you couldn't do that?
Mm-hmm. Worrying about other people too.
Exactly. And so it gets into this loop of fear, expectations.
So you need to just
results
have fun.
Mindset.
You need to just enjoy it.
Exactly. So that was the missing ingredient.
You don't have to win. You just need to enjoy the process. Easier said than done though, right?
But it's exactly true. And I started to go down this road, and of course, like I didn't stop there. I read this book, The Mental Engineering of Professional Athletes by Brandon Sneed. That had a ton of great tips, and I've already kind of talked about that because that's where I've discovered New Calm and how, being in that fight or flight mentality versus being able to transition into parasympathetic nervous system dominance and how important that is. But Brandon wrote this book because he had the yips. Mm-hmm. And so you think, for him, he was a catcher. And so his job is to catch the passes from the pitcher, throw the ball back to the pitcher, and then occasionally like he'll throw someone out at second. And that's kind of the main job of the catcher. And what could he not do? He couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher. Oh. And it just became this routine thing.
Yeah.
And then, but, in his book, he talks about no one wanted to talk about it. They just kind of hoped it would go away. Oh. Or like, hey, like, you got this. Like, don't worry about it. Like, you're, top, this is when he was in college. So he was, had already progressed to the point where he was able to, make it onto a college team. And then all of a sudden, like in his second year, like all of a sudden he just stopped being able to do it. Mm. And anything that anyone would say to try to get him out of the mindset, like, oh, you're excellent at this, like you can do it, or just ignoring it, like none of that is helpful. It's realizing that you have this identity of yourself as someone who can do that, and it's no problem. And then what is challenging that? The pressure of like making a mistake one time, and then it's like, oh my gosh, like that's possible. Like I could just, not be able to throw the ball back. I could grip lock it 45 degrees off of the line. I could pull it directly out of bounds or behind me. when I'm, throwing, or a dart thrower could completely miss the board. An NBA player. This happened with the number 1 draft pick overall a few years ago in the NBA. Markelle Fultz got drafted to the Sixers, and then he was the number 1 pick in the draft. And you know what? He got there, and he could not hit a free throw.
Wow.
It's like they're free. That's what they say in basketball. Like, the free throws are free. Those are gimme points.
Right.
And, before that, he had been an exceptional free throw shooter, got to the highest level, airballing, not even hitting the basket, not even being close. And what had happened was, and I don't know for a fact, but I can assume that he started thinking of himself as the number 1 draft pick, the number 1 player selected in college that year.
He had so much pressure.
He had a lot of pressure. He was also playing in Philly, which those fans are not known to be the nicest fans. But he was basically run out of there. And more recently, he's still in the league. He plays for Orlando now. And his career has been completely rejuvenated. Like, he can hit those shots easy. He's not having any of that stuff. And so it's just, the way that your mind affects your body is just so interesting.
So what should people do? I mean, we talked about some enjoying the moment, trying to think about, like, manage expectations.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. There's a couple really interesting strategies that I think are really important. First, I'll talk about what my Ultimate Frisbee team finally did to win, because I wasn't on the team, but they did come back and finally win the national championship a couple years ago. And one of the things that they did was they started to do these community circles. And basically they would circle up at different times of the year and ask a question, and then they'd go around the circle and give an answer. Some of the questions would be easy, like favorite movie or favorite whatever, favorite place to travel. But some of the questions would be tough. Like, tell me about a time in Ultimate where you felt like you wanted to quit. Or tell me about a time in life where you really struggled. And what was happening in that circle is, as you're going around, you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable to your teammates. And everyone's doing that. And so you foster this environment where, hey, it's okay for you to have issues. You have issues, I have issues. And we're all talking about it. Just like it's okay for you to make mistakes.
And it shifts their thoughts away from the game they're about to play a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, we do this now, and you do it at different times. You don't always do it like right before the game, because you don't want to like have a sad moment necessarily before the game. But when you do that collectively over the course of a season, you build a lot of trust and the ability to be vulnerable with your teammates. And that is something that I think really helped them play their best, because they're allowed to make mistakes. I know you have my back. I know that you have the resiliency to do it, better the next time. And we all sort of build up this collective energy together. So I think that is one huge thing. The other thing is treating high level experiences, high pressure situations like practice.
Oh, yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Trying to get it in your mind that all you're doing is playing the same game that you played at practice. And the way you do that is by focusing on fun. You focus on what it is you're doing, and the fact that, frankly, this is a little bit morbid, but we're all going to die. And in 100 years, like, pretty much no one's going to remember or care about anything that we're doing today.
Yeah, like, oh, he lost that game.
Yeah, like even
he didn't throw well.
Yeah, you're not gonna be sitting on your deathbed thinking about, like, man, I wish I had won that game back in when I was in my 20s. You're gonna be thinking about your family, and you're gonna be thinking about hopefully you're thinking about what a great life you had, but you're probably gonna be thinking about your family, and your family is gonna remember you as not the loser of the, national championship. They're going to be thinking about, like, what kind of dad you are, what kind of listener you were. And so putting that in your mind that what we're doing is just not that important. And so if we're all going to die one day, and no one's going to really remember what happens, we might as well have fun and try our best.
Mm-hmm. And I hear you saying that to Bennett now, our son, like after he plays, a little 5-year-old, he wants to win and he gets upset when he doesn't win, but you're starting to be like, but did you have fun? And did you try your best? And now he's starting to say that too. Yeah. Like we ask him about soccer at recess. He's like, yeah, and I did my best.
Yeah, I did my best. And you know what? I had fun.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I'll say, well, and what was the score? He's like, well, we lost, but I had fun and I did my best. And so treating those high pressure situations like practice and realizing that what a gift it is that you just get to have that experience. And just that is what I think the sports psychologist was trying to get you to, right? Mm-hmm. Get you out of your own head, get you thinking about how you feel and how your body feels. So that is really the way that I overcame the yips. And I would say that, for all of you out there playing golf and for all of you, playing basketball, and if you suffer from this, some of the things like give it a name. Don't hide it. Don't hide from it. When we play disc golf now and I grip lock it, I'm just saying, oh, that was grip lock. And the best thing to do with grip lock is talk about grip lock.
Mm-hmm. Instead of ignoring it.
I had a drop. The best thing to do is talk about the fact that I had a drop, not try to ignore it. And if someone has, a yips type moment, just say, oh, looked like you had the yips there. Like, just remember, we're all out here just having fun. Like, who cares? Right? Yeah. Don't try to hide from it. And if you're golfing and you miss that putt, just think, hey, at least I'm not at work, right?
Right. So, having fun. Outside fun with friends.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. And hopefully some other people can benefit from this and maybe read the books that you read too.
Yeah. And so if you've had an experience with the yips and, you want to talk about it or, share a story with us, we'd love to hear. You can send an email to Taylor@ChainEffect or Caroline@ChainEffect.us. And we'll catch you next time.
All right. Catch you on the flip side.